Chapter 17:21. Yes, father. Kyangu Dongfang nodded in response, and in the next instant, the unyielding aura of the coiling dragon staff erupted from both of their bodies. The two limit Douluos were undoubtedly the most powerful beings on this entire battlefield, and in terms of numbers, the Spirit Pagoda camp had more than twice the number of people the Shrek Academy camp had. The Shrek Academy camp was already missing New Zealand and Shulizzy, and they had participated in a series of grueling battles not long ago, so they were at a very clear disadvantage. Willeen, I'll buy you some time. Get out of here with everyone else, Arahang said as he stepped forward, and his body instantly began to expand. With his invincible Vajra body, his stamina and defensive prowess were definitely unmatched. Arahang had already made this decision as soon as he caught sight of the Spirit Pagoda camp. Regardless of how well enforced this area was, there was a chance that Tang Willeen and the others would be able to break out of it. Furthermore, he had some knowledge of Tang Willeen's connection with the Tree of Life, and he knew that he had to create an opportunity for everyone. Right at this moment, a fearlessly domineering aura that was filled with boundless pride and reckless abandon suddenly erupted from behind Arahang. Kyangu Diding and Kyangu Dongfang's auras were already extremely astonishing, but for some reason, the coiling dragon staves in their hands began to tremble uncontrollably in the face of this aura, as if they were in fear. Kyangu Diding and Kyangu Dongfang couldn't help but exchange a bewildered glance upon seeing this. One's aura was related to their power, but this relationship wasn't absolute. Upon reaching a certain level, each soulmaster would possess a unique will, and this will would determine their power. The more powerful a soulmaster was, the more formidable their will was going to be. At this moment, the will being displayed by Tang Willeen was similar in nature to the battling heaven and earth of the Kyangu family, but it completely dominated Kyangu Diding and Kyangu Dongfang. As a quasi-god, Kyangu Diding had already cultivated battling heaven and earth to its extreme limit, yet Tang Willeen's aura was superior to his. What did this entail? It entailed that at this moment, his aura had exceeded the quasi-god level and was infinitely approaching a divine caliber. How was this possible? He wasn't even a limit Douluo yet. The two limit Douluos were instantly intimidated by this, and they reflexively held back the attacks they were about to unleash with their coiling dragon staves. Tang Willeen patted Arahang on the shoulder before stepping around him. At this moment, Kyangu Diding was appraising Tang Willeen with scorching intensity in his eyes. The aura being displayed by Tang Willeen was what he had been searching for all these years. If he could also possess an aura of this caliber, then perhaps he would be able to make that final breakthrough, and that was more important to him than anything else. Where does this aura of yours come from? Kyangu Diding asked in an eager manner. Where did it come from? A figure surfaced in Tang Willeen's mind. This figure was one of the three opponents his father had faced during the third trial of the sea god. Tang Willeen could clearly recall that figure's unmatched pride and domineering intent. He was also armed with a staff, but heaven and earth seemed to bow down to him. Through his battle with Guan Yue, Tang Willeen had developed a deeper understanding of the auras of those three formidable beings. Tang Willeen knew that his father had intentionally guided him into his spiritual world through their connection. Tang San didn't get a chance to explain anything to him at the time, but those three auras were definitely of the divine caliber, and observing them had helped Tang Willeen in very subtle yet profound ways. His battle with Guan Yue turned out to be the catalyst for an instant of enlightenment, thereby allowing him to naturally utilize these three auras in his own battles. Even though he had only just developed this ability and wasn't able to integrate it with his Dragon Emperor restriction techniques yet, just the aura alone was enough to intimidate Kyangu Diding and Kyangu Dongfang. Just as Kyangu Diding suspected, the three auras that Tang Willeen had witnessed were indeed of the divine caliber, and those three gods had been able to pose a substantial threat even to the God King level Tang San. So they were clearly no ordinary gods themselves. It was very likely that they were also of the God King level. As such, interpreting their auras had assisted Tang Willeen greatly, but not in terms of absolute power. Instead, it was a fundamental improvement that could elevate him to a whole new level. Just like in the case of his restrict life and death, Dragon Emperor charge, if he could cultivate this technique to its limit, then it would be a divine technique that was not inferior to the likes of unpredictable storm. As he released this domineering aura, he had already visualized the first half of his next Dragon Emperor restriction technique. It was going to be restrict heaven and earth. As for the rest, that would have to be developed through more enlightenment and experimentation. Do you really think you've won? Tang Willeen asked with a smile, and no matter how one looked at him, he didn't bear the appearance of someone who had fallen into a lethal trap. A cold light flashed through Kyangu Dongfang's eyes. There's no use in trying to stall for time. Even if the battle god Hall refrains from participating in this battle, there's no way you'll be able to get away. Even with the aura you've displayed, you're still not a limit Douluo yet. If you do become a limit Douluo in the future, perhaps you'll be the second youngling, but you're still too young, and this is where your journey ends. Tang Willeen sighed. I am indeed very young, but that doesn't mean that I'm naive. On top of that, there are so many seniors supporting me. How could they allow me to make such simple and obvious mistakes? You had already begun playing against us when you suggested to the federal parliament to force our Tang sect into participating in this war. You intentionally leaked the news that Eternal Heaven was going to be used in the war, and you knew that for advocates of peace like our Shrek Academy and Tang sect, the last thing we wanted to see was for Eternal Heaven to be used on the Douluo Empire. On top of that, Shrek City was destroyed by a Godslayer missile, so we hold the utmost contempt for these weapons. Your thought process was entirely correct. You used these factors against us, and I'll admit that you did it very well. When we first received this news, our initial thought was to circumvent this war, which led us to the plan of targeting Eternal Heaven, thereby luring us into your trap. Kyangu Dongfang's eyes narrowed slightly upon hearing this. At this moment, he wasn't in a hurry to strike anymore. With the power displayed by Tang Willeen and Arahang's invincible Vajra body, even the Spirit Pagoda camp would have to expend a significant price to take down the Shrek Academy. However, if he could crush his opponents on a psychological basis first, then everything would become much easier. Keep going. What happened next? Kyangu Dongfang made an inviting hand gesture as a smile appeared on his face. Tang Willeen shrugged in response. After that, you continued to lure us deeper into your trap, even going as far as to intentionally leak the fact that Eternal Heaven was being guarded by the Sea God Legion. I must admit that your plan was watertight. You even used the history between Elder Long and the Boundless Ocean Douluo to your advantage. I don't know how you managed to convince the Boundless Ocean Douluo, but your plan was already halfway to success once you persuaded the Boundless Ocean Douluo to lie to Elder Long and tell her that Eternal Heaven was situated on the 18th level of the Battle God Hall. I'm sure your Spirit Pagoda had to expend quite a heavy price for this, right? Chapter 17:22. Kyangu Dongfang finally sensed that something was amiss upon hearing this, and his brows furrowed slightly as a cold light shimmered within his eyes. However, Tang Willeen paid no heed to the change in his expression, and continued, and then you set your plan into motion. You created this setting to fool us into thinking that the Battle God Hall was tightly guarded, thereby indicating that Eternal Heaven is being stored here. You didn't know what method we would employ to obtain Eternal Heaven, but you knew that we would definitely come as Eternal Heaven is far too alluring to us, right? Kyangu Dongfang nodded in response. That's right, I knew you had the ability to make it here. You were able to disguise yourselves and ruin my joust for a spouse event, so you definitely also had a way to get into the Central Legion. I just didn't think that you would get here so soon. If you had arrived 2 days later, we would have had even more measures prepared. Tang Willeen said. I certainly don't doubt that. You devised this painstaking plan and enlisted the help of the Battle God Hall to ensure that this would be an inescapable trap. At least, on the surface, it looks like your trap has worked, and everything is going according to your plan. However, there's a question that I have for you. Chairman Kyangu. Go ahead. Kyangu Dongfang prompted. Tang Willeen asked, if this is a trap, then where is Eternal Heaven actually being stored? Is your Spirit Pagoda aware of this information? Kyangu Dongfang smiled, and replied, I considered that as well. Eternal Heaven is the Federation's final trump card, and its location is information of the highest level of confidentiality, so even we don't know where it is. As such, even if our plan had been leaked, you still wouldn't have any chance of getting your hands on Eternal Heaven. Kyangu Dongfang was very confident as he spoke, and this was the key to why he had always felt this plan to be infallible. He had already warned that Shrek Academy and the Tang sect would definitely come after Eternal Heaven, and he had requested the higher-ups of the federal military to keep a close eye on the Godslayer missile. He then used the existence of Eternal Heaven to plot against Tang Willeen and his friends. Tang Willeen continued, you may not know its location, but someone has to know, right? Kyangu Dongfang faltered slightly upon hearing this. Of course someone knew of its location. Otherwise, how was the Federation supposed to use the missile when required? Only the highest-ranking members of the federal military knew of Eternal Heaven's true storage location, and it was extremely tightly guarded. So what was Tang Willeen trying to say here? Tang Willeen continued, someone has to know, and they have to be the highest-ranking officials of the military, people absolutely loyal to the Federation. Hence, that narrows down the list significantly, but I'm sure one particular person is on that list. A hint of unease finally began to well up within Kyangu Dongfang's heart. Who are you referring to? Tang Willeen smiled, and replied, I'm naturally referring to the person that you used and convinced to cooperate with your plan. Kyangu Dongfang faltered slightly upon hearing. hearing this, clearly failing to understand, but Kyangu Diding immediately made a realization, and his expression darkened as he asked, "You're talking about Chen Xinji, right?" Tang Wuling replied, of course. The boundless ocean Douluo is arguably the most powerful official in the military, the whole master of the battle god Hall, the commander-in-chief of the sea god Legion. No one is more right than he does to know the location of eternal heaven, isn't that right? You managed to convince him, so there's naturally no way that he would have leaked the information to us. In fact, even his meeting with Elder Long took place under your surveillance, right? I'm sure I haven't made any errors in judgment here. Kayang Diding asked in a cold voice, are you telling me that a limit Douluo who values honor over his own life would go back on his word and commit treason to leak the location of the eternal heaven to you? Tang Wuling sighed. Theoretically, it would be impossible. The boundless ocean Douluo dedicated his entire life to the Federation military and even gave up on the love of his life. He's become one of the most powerful beings in this world and the whole master of the battle god Hall, and behind that is a story of perseverance and glory. To him, honor really is more important than his life, and he would never go back on his promise to you. So he deceived Elder Long. However, you failed to take into account that love can also be more important than one's life, and it can even exceed the value of honor. It's something that some people are willing to pursue at all costs. Ultimately, your failure stems from your underestimation of Elder Long's importance to the boundless ocean Douluo, and you underestimated the impact of their meeting. Kayang Diding and Kayang Dongfang's expressions changed drastically upon hearing this. A faint smile appeared on Tang Wuling's face as he continued. If I'm not mistaken, the heartless Douluo and the amorous Douluo should have already obtained eternal heaven. I know that you've disabled all communication devices here. Why don't you give the Spirit Pagoda headquarters a call to see if it's being visited by some guests? All of the members of the Spirit Pagoda camp were stunned to hear this, and even the people in the Shrek Academy camp were completely dumbfounded. What was going on? Arahang turned to Tang Wuling with a flabbergasted expression, while Tang Wuling continued to appraise the Spirit Pagoda camp with a faint smile. Kayang Dongfang turned to Kayang Diding, and the latter only hesitated momentarily before instructing, make the call. Kayang Dongfang pulled out his soul communicator, which had a special signal, and immediately dialed the number of the Spirit Pagoda headquarters. The call was almost immediately connected, and a familiar voice rang out from the other end. Long time no talk, brother Kayang. I hope you've been well. The voice belongs to none other than amorous Douluo Zhangxin. He was currently in the Spirit Pagoda headquarters. Zhangxin. Kayang Dongfang's voice immediately cooled to a freezing point. Zhangxin said, it's been so long since we last met, so old man Cao and I decided to pay you a visit, but you were absent. We came here with a present for you. Well, actually, it's a present for the Spirit Pagoda. I hope you'll be pleased with it. Come over here, boy. Tell your father what present we brought with us. An urgent voice immediately rang out. Come back, father. They somehow managed to get their hands on eternal heaven, and it's definitely the real eternal heaven. Come back and save me. A hint of desperation had crept into Kayang Hanging's voice at the end. No one was completely fearless in the face of death, and the more powerful one was, the more they cherished their own life as their lifespan was far longer than that of the average person. In the face of eternal heaven, not only was he going to die, the entire Spirit Pagoda headquarters would cease to exist, just like Shrek City. In fact, given the power of eternal heaven, the Spirit Pagoda headquarters would suffer an even more terrible fate. Chapter 1723. At the very least, the students of Shrek Academy had all survived, but Eternal Heaven would most likely be able to destroy the entire Spirit Pagoda headquarters along with everything up to a kilometer underground. There would definitely be no survivors. Don't you dare, Zhangxin. Don't forget that Tang Wuling and the others are still at our mercy. Give Eternal Heaven to my son, and I'll release them. Even the cunning and wily Kayang Dongfang was becoming blind with rage. He had painstakingly developed this plan, only for everything to be ruined by such a massive twist. He was completely unable to accept this outcome. Zhangxin sighed. Do you still not know what's happening, brother Kayang? Chen Xinji has already told us Eternal Heaven's location and helped us secure it. Do you think he'll allow you to do anything to Wuling and the others on his territory? From the very beginning, your plan was destined to fail. We're not asking for much. Just get your son to transfer some money to our Tang sect. Right at this moment, a beam of light descended from the heavens and landed at the direct center of the 18th level. A figure then appeared within the light. This was an elderly man with a head of impeccably combed silver hair, wearing a set of antiquated robes that belonged to a distant era. He had his hands clasped behind his back, and there was a complex look in his eyes. Kayang Diding immediately flared up with rage at the sight of this man. Chen Xinji. That's right, the man who had just arrived was none other than boundless ocean Douluo Chen Xinji. Chen Xinji sighed. My apologies, brother Diding. I didn't want to have to do this, but I've lived my entire life for my clan, for glory, for the battle god Hall, and in the process, I've become indebted to many people, especially her. I've already handed in my resignation to the federal parliament, and from this moment forth, I have nothing to do with the military and the battle god Hall. I'm just a normal soul master. After this, I'm going to Shrek Academy, to her side. From the moment I told her the truth in secret, the past Chen Xinji was already dead. All that remains is an old man who's going to dedicate the rest of his life to the woman he loves, regardless of how she treats me. My sincerest apologies. Once again, Chen Xinji extended a deep bow toward Kayang Diding with an apologetic look in his eyes as he spoke. How could you do this, Chen Xinji? You've betrayed the entire federation. You're a treasonous criminal. Kayang Dongfang exclaimed. Chen Xinji replied, that's nothing compared to the crimes I've committed against her. I already told you that the past Chen Xinji is already dead. The Federation can pass down any judgment upon me, and if anyone from the Battle God Hall wishes to punish me, then they can go ahead. However, I'm going to retaliate for her sake. I must return to her side and use the rest of my life to repay her, even if I can only make up a tiny fraction of the debt that I owe her. He's gone insane. Kayang Diding roared with fury. Chen Xinji, at the very least, you have to keep out of this matter from now on. This was his only hope to turn the tables. He had to capture everyone from the Shrek Academy camp at all costs. Do you still not understand that your plan has already failed? Another voice rang out, and Guan Yue descended beside Chen Xinji. Guan Yue, even you. Kayang Diding's eyes widened with astonishment. Even the perpetually warm and hospitable Guan Yue was exuding a frosty aura. If I didn't have to consider the stability of the continent, I would make sure that this is your final resting place. I'm sure you're unaware that I was once a student of Shrek Academy and a candidate to become one of Shrek's 7 monsters. I left the academy to join the Battle God Hall as I owed Xinji a great debt, but I will always be a member of Shrek Academy. The Atlas Douluo that you plotted against in collusion with the Holy Spirit cult was none other than my senior disciple brother. If we had concrete evidence of your collusion with the Holy Spirit cult, then we'd make sure to keep you here forever. One battle god after another descended from the heavens, landing behind the 2 whole masters, and Kayang Dongfang felt as if he were about to go insane. Never did he imagine that all of his painstaking planning would lead to this outcome. You battle gods are being paid a salary by the Federation and enjoying the Federation's resources. Are you going to help these 2 traitors as well? Kayang Dongfang was beginning to grasp at straws now. As the first battle god, Aoru made his way over to Guan Yue and declared, the whole master is my teacher. Everything that I have was given to me by my teacher, so his decision is mine. He paused here as a derisive look appeared in his eyes, then continued, besides, are we really betraying the Federation here? You 2 are far too ambitious for your own good, even going as far as to nurture a private army. Are we really the traitors here? Perhaps it's best for Eternal Heaven to be held by the Tang sect and Shrek Academy, and the military should undergo an overhaul. The federal parliament shouldn't be under the control of dangerously ambitious people like you. At this point, Kayang Dongfang and his father knew the game was up. Only now did they realize that they were the prey instead of the hunters. Chen Xinji's eyes were still full of mixed emotions as he turned to Tang Wuling. Let them go, Sect Master Tang. I'm indebted to them for going back on my word, and this is my final wish. After this, I'll return to Shrek Academy with you. What do you think? All right, we'll do as you say, Senior. Tang Wuling replied in a respectful manner. It could be said that the one who had played the truly instrumental role in this victory wasn't Tang Wuling, nor was it the amorous Douluo or the heartless Douluo. Instead, it was Long Yeyu. That day, Chen Xinji had agreed to the Spirit Pagoda that he would tell Long Yeyu that Eternal Heaven was situated on the 18th level of the Battle God Hall. The Spirit Pagoda had promised the Battle God Hall irresistible compensation, and on top of that, Chen Xinji was also someone intrinsically motivated to agree to this plan. Long Yeyu's rejection had evoked a sense of indignation within his heart, and he really did want to instigate this war. However, when Long Yeyu had told him that she had only married someone else as she was bearing his child at the time, Chen Xinji felt as if a sword had been driven through his heart. The reality was that she had once had his child, and the child was stillborn, which was why she resented him so intensely. Furthermore, even though she had married someone else, she had never betrayed him, and throughout her life, he remains the only man man that she had physical relations with. At the time, Chen Zhenji had been struck by a sense of crushing pain and despair. All of Long Yeyu's resentment and coldness toward him suddenly became justified, and she didn't even need to explain herself any further beyond that. Only then did Chen Zhenji realize just how heavily indebted he was toward her. In contrast with Long Yeyu, he had married someone and produced a long line of descendants while also rising to dizzying heights in his military career. However, Long Yeyu had nothing. She had remained in Shrek Academy her entire life, and she didn't even have any next of kin to look after her. It was only after realizing this that he came to understand just how much he owed her, and there was naturally no way he could continue to cooperate with the spirit pagoda after that. In reality, the plan that Tang Wulin was carrying out hadn't been devised by the two limit Douluos of the Tang sect, Elder Long, Yali, or even himself. Instead, the mastermind was none other than Chen Zhenji. Chapter 1724. Of course, only a tiny handful of people were aware of this plan, and in order to maintain secrecy, Tang Wulin was the only member of Shrek's 7 monsters who knew the truth. Now, the truth had finally been revealed, and eternal heaven had also fallen into the hands of the Tang sect and Shrek Academy. This was only a part of Chen Zhenji's repentance. On that day, Chen Zhenji had visited Shrek Academy in person to tell Long Yeyu the truth, but Long Yeyu had refused to see him, so he had met with Tang Wulin instead and devised this plan with him. Long Yeyu had been willing to set aside her resentment for Chen Zhenji to ask him for the whereabouts of eternal heaven, so it was clear that this was extremely important for Shrek Academy, and Chen Zhenji decided to help Shrek Academy. In doing so, he was essentially giving up everything that he currently owned. Even if all of the battle gods and everyone in this world were to approve of his actions, he simply couldn't get over himself. Thus, he resigned from all of his positions, and just as he had said, the past Chen Zhenji was already dead. In his place was a new Chen Zhenji who was going to repay Long Yeyu at all costs. As such, nothing that Kayangyu Guiding and Kayangyu Dongfang said quelled his decision. Everything had already been decided following Long Yeyu's visit. Back when they had first become romantic partners over a century ago, neither of them could have imagined that their relationship would alter the political landscape of the entire continent someday. Kayangyu Guiding heaved a long sigh, and he knew that there was no point in saying anything further. He cast a final cold glance at Chen Zhenji, then waved a hand, and instructed, "Let's go." Thus, the spirit pagoda camp departed, and Chen Zhenji turned to Guan Yue with a fallen expression. "Once I'm gone, the Battle God Hall will rest on your shoulders. However, I couldn't think of a better person to entrust the Battle God Hall to. I've known for a very long time that your powers aren't inferior to mine, but you were never competitive and remained humble to a fault. After this, the political landscape of the entire continent is most likely going to shift, and there's basically no chance that the war will take place. I'm guessing there will be some major changes in the federal parliament, and perhaps the military will impeach me, but none of that matters anymore. Eternal heaven is in the hands of Shrek Academy, so they won't be able to do anything regardless of how big a fuss they kick up." A hint of sadness appeared in Guan Yue's eyes. "Are you really just leaving like this, old friend?" Having partnered Chen Zhenji for so many years, the two had developed a deep bond. Chen Zhenji was very domineering, but he had always been very respectful toward Guan Yue. Chen Zhenji managed the external affairs, while Guan Yue looked after the Battle God Hall from the inside, and under their management, the Battle God Hall had gone from strength to strength. Chen Zhenji was so revered in the military that at the very least, he had absolute authority in the Sea God Legion and the Battle God Hall, so the Federation wouldn't dare to do anything to him. Otherwise, a military revolt could take place, and that was not something that the Federation could afford to have happened. Thus, even if Chen Zhenji decided to remain in his position, no one would be able to do anything to him. Everyone has to be responsible for their own actions, and I'm no exception. All I want is to go to Yeyu and not have to think about anything else. Besides, I'm already an old man, and it's about time I step down. Once I leave, you'll be the Hall Master, and Ru will be the Vice Hall Master. Shrek Academy agreed to forge a suit of 4-word battle armor for us free of charge, and I think it should go to Ru. With the foundation he's accumulated during all his years of cultivation, there's a good chance that he'll be able to progress to the limit Douluo level with a suit of 4-word battle armor. Hall Master. Rather than being elated to hear this, Ru fell to his knees with a grief-stricken expression before kowtowing to Chen Zhenji. Hall Master. All of the other battle gods quickly followed suit. To them, Chen Zhenji was not just their leader, but also a mentoring father figure. He was always very strict, but without him, none of them would be standing where they were today. Time and time again, Chen Zhenji had secured massive amounts of resources from the Federation to help them grow and develop, and what they admired most about Chen Zhenji was that he was always able to ensure fairness and justice under all circumstances. As such, the Battle God Hall was an extremely cohesive and harmonious unit, and Chen Zhenji's decisions almost always represented the entire Battle God Hall. In fact, even if he were to declare that the Battle God Hall was defecting to Shrek Academy, no one would raise any objections. "What are you all doing?" Chen Zhenji swept his hands through the air, releasing a burst of gentle soul power to help everyone to their feet. Even though he bore the appearance of a wizened elderly man, his aura still belonged to an invincible quasi-god. At this point, Tang Wulin and the others had arrived beside the battle gods, and Tang Wulin smiled as he said, "There's no need to be so sad. Everyone, Shrek Academy welcomes visits from all of you at any time. It's actually a good thing that the Boundless Ocean Douluo is coming to our academy. Truth be told, the academy currently has a way of elevating one's life energy, and I can guarantee that the Boundless Ocean Douluo's lifespan will be extended by at least 20 years at our academy. You'll have a lot more time to see him. On top of that, our Shrek Academy will be more than happy to forge an alliance with the Battle God Hall." This was a perfect opportunity to improve the relationship between the two organizations, and it really was thanks to Guan Yue and Chen Zhenji's assistance that they had been able to obtain Eternal Heaven. In addition to that, Guan Yue had guided him on his path to attaining Sphere Essence, and Tang Wulin naturally had to repay him for this. Eternal Heaven had switched hands, and the entire continent was going to undergo some massive changes. The overly ambitious Spirit Pagoda and Eagle faction were undoubtedly going to be dealt heavy blows, and without Chen Zhenji, the military was also going to be far less formidable than it had been in the past. As one of the pillars of the Federation, the Battle God Hall had an extremely close relationship with both the Central Legion and the Sea God Legion, so it would definitely benefit Shrek Academy immensely to forge an alliance with the Battle God Hall. As for the Spirit Pagoda, Tang Wulin harbored nothing but resentment toward them, but this wasn't the time to exact revenge. Once the situation on the continent stabilized, the first thing he was going to do was to seek out the Holy Spirit Cult. The Holy Spirit Cult was an entity that could shake the foundation of the entire world, and it had to be completely destroyed. After the Holy Spirit Cult, it would be the Spirit Pagoda's turn to get what they deserved. All of the battle gods were astonished to hear what Tang Wulin had just said. One had to realize that the lifespans of Limit Douluo were already extremely lengthy. Chen Zhenji had already lived for over 100 years, and barring any mishaps, 200 was a milestone that he would reach without any issues. However, having been in the military for so many years, Chen Zhenji had sustained many chronic injuries, and his bodily condition had been on the wane during the past few years. At the very most, he would have around a dozen to 20 years left to live. If his lifespan could be extended by 20 years, then that would mean that he would be able to live for 30 to 40 more years. That was music to everyone's ears. "Even I'm tempted to go with you now," Guan Yue said with a wry smile. Tang Wulin smiled, and said, "Shrek Academy welcomes you with open arms." Guan Yue had been assisting them to the best of his abilities ever since the Joust for a Spouse event, and it was clear that he harbored genuine love and devotion for Shrek Academy. With him as the Hall Master of the Battle God Hall, Tang Wulin had nothing to worry about. Guan Yue shook his head in response. "Old man Chen is already going with you. If I were to go as well, the Federation wouldn't be willing to let things slide. Let's go and see those two friends of yours. I have a feeling that the girl has very good chances of making a breakthrough." Chapter 1725. The girl that he was referring to was naturally none other than New Zealand, who was essentially forcing herself to attain Sword Essence. Leaving the 18th level was far easier than arriving, and Tang Wulin could sense that there were many secrets in the Battle God Hall that they hadn't seen. It appeared that the Battle God Hall had far more up its sleeve than they had imagined. Upon returning to the first level, they discovered that New Zealand was still enveloped within the cocoon of light, but the cocoon was currently trembling incessantly, as if there was something struggling to tear its way out of the cocoon. Shu Lizzie was desperately trying to find ways to help, but there was nothing he could do. Tang Wulin turned to Chen Zhenji and asked, "Is there any way to help her, Senior Chen?" Chen Zhenji shook his head in response. Even though she forced herself into this state, I can sense that her foundation is very solid. She can only rely on herself to attain Sword Essence. Otherwise, it would be far too cheap. Just place your trust in her. Through my observation, I can tell that she has exceptional willpower, and that's even more important than aptitude when it comes to attaining Weapon Essence. essence. The greater one's willpower, the greater chance of success. Tang Wuling nodded in response, and he could only repress his concern as he waited off to the side. Time slowly passed by, and the trembling of the cocoon was becoming more and more violent. Everyone was looking on with serious expressions as they knew that the key moment had arrived. If Yizinglen failed to make a breakthrough here, then the harm inflicted upon her would most likely be permanent, meaning that she would never be able to take this step. She had chosen this path for herself, and success was the only option. This had always been Yizinglen's personality, and it couldn't be changed by anyone. Finally, a burst of loud ringing sound, and a gash appeared on the top of the cocoon, immediately following which a burst of enormous sword intent erupted forth. The entire battle god hall began to tremor slightly, and everyone felt as if the sword intent were about to pierce through their bodies, forcing them to draw upon their soul power to protect themselves. The cocoon crumbled, and a figure rose up into the sky. All of the sword intent instantly subsided, and the figure returned to her original appearance. Yizinglen's long hair had come undone and was trailing down her shoulders, adding a hint of feminine charm to her cold disposition. She was hovering in midair, and even though she wasn't holding her sword, it was as if her entire being had become a sword, but the sharpness of the sword was being concealed as such. Her aura had become less sharp and more gentle. In fact, even her appearance had become more gentle compared with prior to her metamorphosis. She descended from the heavens, and a warm look appeared in her eyes as her gaze fell upon Shu Lizzie. Shu Lizzie was ecstatic to see that she was unharmed, and he quickly rushed over to her. Are you all right, Sister Yizinglen? Are you in any pain or discomfort? I'm fine, Yizinglen replied in a gentle voice. Shu Lizzie heaved a sigh of relief upon hearing this. I'm glad that you're okay. Yizinglen suddenly spread her arms open and wound them around Shu Lizzie's rotund waist as she laid her head down onto his shoulder. I'm sorry for being so willful and selfish, Lizzie. I was always obsessing over my sword and never considered your feelings. I'll never be like that again. Shu Lizzie was rooted to the spot upon hearing this, and everyone else from Shrek Academy was also astonished. Had Yizinglen been possessed? Was this still her? Since when was she capable of being so gentle and saying something like this? The ones with the strongest reactions to this were Xixi and Yue Zhengyu, who were like a pair of twins with their mouths gaped open in disbelief. Even Yuan and Yui was completely dumbfounded, and Xu Shaoyan had even thrown her hand over her own mouth. Tang Wulin's eyelids twitched slightly as he rubbed his own eyes. Was this really Yizinglen? Never did they think that she would say something so gentle and passionate in front of so many people. I was about to fail just now. In fact, I was on the verge of failing on multiple occasions. My heart was filled with disappointment and indignation, but I had given everything I had. I had expended all of my ability and willpower, and I couldn't persevere any longer. I was so close to attaining sword essence, but it remained just out of my reach, and I couldn't figure out why. I was so sad, and I thought that I was going to die. Perhaps people on the brink of death experience a heightened sense of awareness, but in that instant, I was able to sense your emotions. You've always been by my side for so many years, and I was always aware of your feelings, but even though I reciprocate your love, I was unable to express it. Just now, I regretted everything. I regretted never truly accepting your feelings and being with you. I regretted wasting so much of the precious time we had together. I'm sorry, Lizzie. I should have apologized to you long ago. It was exactly because I could sense your anxiety, unease, and your unwavering love for me that I finally understood why I've been able to attain sword essence. It's because my sword was too lonesome. It was sharp, but that was all. It was devoid of emotion and substance. In that instant, when I was on the brink of death, I realized that sacrificing everything I had wasn't the key to reaching the pinnacle. Instead, I should have been striving to gain more rather than to sacrifice everything. I was unwilling to express my emotions, so they were constantly repressed deep within my heart. You are so important to me, yet I refused to acknowledge that, and as a result, my sword soul remained stagnant. It was also in that instant that I truly came to understand just how important you are to me. You are an irreplaceable figure in my life. Lizzie, I love you. As she completed her confession in front of everyone, her entire body seemed to be glowing. In that instant, Yizinglen truly opened up her heart to Shu Lizzie, and it was also in this moment that Shu Lizzie finally felt like she was truly his woman. He slowly returned to his senses and locked Yizinglen in a tight embrace as tears flowed uncontrollably down his face. His lips were trembling, but he was unable to muster up so much as a single word. In this moment, he was the only thing in Yizinglen's eyes, and the entire outside world had lost focus. No one was going to disrupt this moment for them. Everyone's hearts were filled with genuine well wishes. Ling Zichen was standing in her mecha not far behind Tang Wuling, and her eyes were slightly glazed over. Just a moment ago, her heart had been filled with fury toward Tang Wuling. It was clear that he had kept everything a secret from her and struck a deal with the battle god without her knowledge. She had genuinely thought that they were here to secure eternal heaven, and after finding out the truth, she wanted nothing better than to give him a mighty slap. She had been played for a fool. Did he expect her to leak the secret to the world had she been told? What a bastard. Chapter 1726. At the time, she was fuming with rage, but it would have been unbecoming of her to throw a tantrum in front of so many people. Thus, her rage had been building and was on the verge of overflowing, but the scene unfolding before her rooted her to the spot. In particular, after hearing Yizinglen's heartfelt monologue, she felt like the two of them were very similar people. She had also sacrificed everything for her soul technology research, including her feelings and emotions. Could it be that only by allowing herself to feel those emotions could she reach a high level? Before she knew it, her fury toward Tang Wuling had gradually faded away. Looking at his tall and reliable figure, she couldn't help but place herself in his shoes and think from his perspective. He was the Tang sect master and the Sea God's pavilion master. No one had more pressure and responsibilities on their shoulders than he did. Throughout this operation, he was the only one who knew the truth, yet none of what had happened earlier had been an act. The battle gods were most likely also unaware of the truth, and the sparring match had benefited both sides immensely. For soul masters of their caliber, practical combat experience was the best driver of growth and improvement, so multiple birds were being killed here with one stone. Was this guy really that smart? Furthermore, this trip had shown Ling Zichen that it would be impossible to replace soul masters with mechas, at least in this generation. Regardless of how powerful mechas became, they simply couldn't be as versatile as soul masters, and even the most powerful mechas couldn't compare with those who stood at the pinnacle of the soul master world. Her one-sided battle against Mozahong had displayed this to her, and after that, she had witnessed the battle between Tang Wuling and Guan Yue. Even though she had only just barely regained her consciousness at the time, that battle had still left an everlasting impression on her. Perhaps only the Godslayer missiles could compare with the most exceptional soul master when it came to power, but soul masters were significantly superior when it came to versatility. In that instant, she finally understood that she had been hitting so many road bumps in her research precisely because she was just a normal person. The root of all of her problems stemmed from the fact that she had always hoped to develop a mecha that could be used by a normal person and allow them to become more powerful than soul masters. Yet the reality was that the most powerful mechas had to be piloted by the most powerful soul masters. The mechas that she had developed were more formidable than normal mechas, but what if she also switched her focus to developing mechas for the most powerful soul masters? Perhaps she would have made many significant breakthroughs long ago. Would a whole new world be opened up to her if she stopped being so stubborn and devoted? With that in mind, an indescribable feeling began to well up in her heart, and she had never felt so relaxed before. It turned out that empathy and the ability to think in the position of others was a fantastic source of inspiration. Perhaps it was time that she found a man for herself. Perhaps if she could find a man she could rely on, the pressure on her would be somewhat alleviated, and she would be more inspired. She couldn't help but turn her gaze toward Tang Wuling as these thoughts occurred to her. If it were him, then she could consider it. After all, he wasn't too bad. Tang Wuling was naturally unaware of the thoughts and emotions flashing through Ling Zichen's heart. In this moment, his heart was filled with joy for Shu Lizzie and Yizinglen. All of Shrek's 7 monsters had entered relationships, but none of them had actually gotten married. Perhaps they were going to be the first pair. Chen Xinji's eyes were filled with a hint of forlorn reminiscence. Many years ago, he and Long Yeyu had also confessed to one another in a similar fashion. So much time had passed then, and at his age, he no longer regretted anything as he didn't have enough time left to linger on regrets. All he wanted was to go to Long Yeyu as soon as possible and stay by her side no matter what. Ahem. Chen Xinji cleared his throat, and Shu Lizzie and Yizinglen were finally brought back to reality. A deep blush immediately appeared on Yizinglen's face, and only now did she realize that there were so many bystanders present. Having just made a breakthrough, she was focused wholeheartedly on expressing all of her emotions, and she had thought that Shu Lizzie was the only person with her. Only now did the realization that they were being watched set in, and she was feeling extremely embarrassed. She buried her head into Shu Lizzie's chest and gently punched his shoulders, refusing to raise her head no matter what. Tang Wuling stepped in to alleviate the awkwardness, and said, "All right, let's get back to the academy." After that, he made an inviting hand gesture toward Chen Xinji for him to lead the way out. Guan Yue and the battle gods accompanied them all the way to the exit of the battle god hall, and in order to save the tears and heartache, Chen Xinji merely departed without any further parting words. With Chen Xinji leading the way, no one in the Central Legion was going to attack the group. All of the surrounding soldiers of the Central Legion saluted as Chen Xinji passed passed by, and all of the weapons aimed at the exit of the battle god hall were directed up into the heavens. Thus, everyone promptly departed without a hitch. Several days later, several pieces of astonishing news spread through the entire Douluo Federation. The battle god hall master and commander-in-chief of the Sea God Legion, boundless ocean Douluo Chenzinji, had retired with immediate effect due to health reasons. At the same time, the military action that the Federation was preparing to take against the Star Luo Empire was temporarily terminated due to lack of preparation, and no resumption was scheduled. Due to Chenzinji's resignation, the military underwent a massive change. In particular, the question of who was going to succeed Chenzinji as the commander-in-chief of the Sea God Legion became a hotly contested topic. The entire federal parliament was also significantly affected, and all types of rumors were being spread. An entire month passed, and the parliament held a snap election, during which the Dou faction gained far more parliamentary seats than before. Immediately thereafter came another piece of shocking news. Following extensive discussions, the parliament had decided to revoke the branding of the Tang sect as a treasonous organization. The Tang sect was going to remain an extremely important organization to the Douluo Federation, and at least 2 leading figures of the Tang sect were invited to undertake positions in the federal parliament. At the same time, the rebuild of Shrek Academy was officially approved, and the parliament extended the same invitation to the academy, only to be refused as Shrek Academy wished to maintain its perpetually neutral stance. Within the span of just a few months, the political landscape had become completely unrecognizable, and those in the know could clearly see that the most powerful organization during this period of time seemed to have gone radio silent. Throughout all of these massive changes, the Spirit Pagoda hadn't issued any public statements, and it was as if the entire organization had disappeared. After all of these major shifts, the political landscape began to stabilize after a few months, and the Dou faction was on par with the Eagle faction again. Why, big sister, why did you do this? You knew it was him all along, didn't you? Shenzing interrogated in an enraged manner. Shen Yue was no longer a young woman, but she was still quite beautiful. However, what was most astonishing was the fact that she was currently wearing general epaulets, and even Shenzing had been promoted to become a colonel. What are you doing? Is this any way to be speaking to your superior? Shenzing asked as she put on a stern expression. Under normal circumstances, Shenzing would reflexively be a little fearful of her sister's stern facade, but on this day, her fury was outweighing her fear. Chapter 1727. Am I wrong? You knew it was him all along, and you knew that he was the cause of my nightmares, yet you intentionally arranged a meeting between us. Is this how you treat your sister? Shenzing was on the verge of tears at this point. A hint of sympathy welled up in Shen Yue's heart at the sight of Shenzing's fragile display, and she sighed. Members of our family must endure more hardship than the average person. I'll admit that I arranged everything, and in reality, we have been working very closely with Shrek Academy for a very long time. In fact, we are the military family with the closest relationship with Shrek Academy. You simply didn't know this as you hadn't entered the core circle of our family yet. Why do you think I have been assigned to the North Sea Legion in the past? The truth of the matter is that we've always been looking after the demonic island for Shrek Academy. Shenzing faltered slightly upon hearing this. Why didn't you tell me all this earlier? Shen Yue sighed. With your stubborn personality, you would have kicked up a huge fuss as soon as I told you. Perhaps your encounter with him really was a nightmarish experience. But don't you feel like your growth was accelerated during the course of this nightmare? Without that experience, how would you have reached the rank of colonel at such a young age? Shenzing bit down on her lower lip, and she was suddenly at a loss for what to say or do. A meaningful look appeared in Shen Yue's eyes as she said, if you can't forget him, then go to Shrek Academy to look for him. Go to Shrek Academy? What can I do there? Shenzing asked. Shen Yue replied, I don't know. That's up to you. You have to directly face your feelings toward him. Let me ask you this. What if he really had been your blind date partner on that day? Shenzing shuddered slightly upon hearing this, and she suddenly arrived at a realization as a stunned look appeared on her face. Shenzing sighed. I've already done everything in my power to protect you. Otherwise, according to the will of the seniors in our family, they would want you to discard your dignity and throw yourself at him at all costs. Given your past history with him and his constantly elevating status, you would be the perfect candidate to enter a political marriage with him to benefit our family. But is that what you want? Shenzing stared blankly at Shen Yue. Was that what she wanted? She really didn't know. The thought of a political marriage orchestrated by her family immediately evoked a sense of resentment within her. She truly hated being a member of such a family. If she were to enter a political marriage, she would become a pawn, a tool that would strengthen her family's bond with Shrek Academy. Would she really be able to be with him under such an arrangement, especially considering he already had another woman in his heart? Don't think too much about it. Our family really did use you throughout the course of all of this, and that's why you were able to progress so quickly up the military ladder. I've taken on as much pressure for you as I can in exchange for your freedom. You can do whatever you want from now on. No one is going to try to use you again. Shen Yue's voice had become a lot gentler as she spoke. Big sister. Shenzing threw her arms around Shen Yue in a tight embrace as tears flowed down her face. Shen Yue sighed with a wry smile. I've already sacrificed far too much for our family. I don't want my only sister to walk the same path as I did. I've taken on all of the responsibility of our generation, so you don't need to shoulder any of the burden. I don't regret anything that happened in the past. At the very least, it helped you grow and mature, and you're able to look after yourself now. Your future is now in your hands. Do with it as you please. But big sister, I really don't know what to do. The construction of Shrek City was still ongoing, and most of the forestation project around the main school building was already complete. Construction for the housing for the Yuan and family was also complete, and Shrek Academy had officially announced that it was giving a sector of land that spanned a quarter of the circumference of the Sea God's Lake permanently to the Tang sect. In that area, the Tang sect was responsible for its own construction, which was also progressing at a rapid rate. The entire Shrek City was heading in a very positive direction. After the first semester of classes, some students had already been expelled, but the vast majority of students were able to fulfill the lofty requirements set for them and continue to further their education. However, on a certain day, a new face had appeared in Shrek Academy. This was an elderly man with a head of white hair, and he appeared on the drill ground of Shrek Academy at the break of dawn every morning, sweeping the drill ground in front of the main school building with a large broom. It would take him from dawn to noon to sweep the entire drill ground, and he did this every single day. The students who came out for their morning training would often spot the elderly man, and he would respond with warm smiles whenever he was greeted by the students, but he very rarely spoke. His attire was also very plain and simple, consisting of the most ordinary of rough cloth garments. Yi Zichen had already built up a habit of waking up early in the mornings. In the entire first class, Luo Gixing paid him the most attention as he possessed exceptional aptitude and outstanding work ethic. Luo Gixing told Yi Zichen that Shrek Academy was never short of prodigies, but only a very small proportion of those prodigies went on to become truly powerful beings, and all of them were exceptionally hard workers. Yi Zichen was becoming more and more enamored of Shrek Academy, and ever since he had witnessed Tang Wuling in action, he had made up his mind that he was going to become just as powerful someday. Thus, even though he possessed outstanding aptitude, he didn't dare to slack off even in the slightest. He worked hard in his cultivation every day, and the vast majority of his time was dedicated to cultivation. Every morning, he would go for a run on the drill ground as a warm-up in preparation for the subsequent practical combat lesson. Soon, he discovered that he was able to see that elderly man every day during this time period, and in all honesty, he was rather perplexed by his presence. The elderly man appeared to be at least 70 to 80 years of age. Wasn't it too large a workload for him to be sweeping such a massive drill ground every day? On this day, Yi Zichen decided that he couldn't stand by and watch any longer, and he dogged over to the elderly man. Let me sweep in your stead, Grandpa. The elderly man looked up, and a faint smile appeared on his face at the sight of the genuine look in the young boy's eyes. It's all right. This is my morning exercise, just like what you're doing right now. It's just that I'm too old and don't want to run, so I'm exercising by sweeping instead. Continue on your run. I'll be fine. Really? Yi Zichen was still a little concerned. The elderly nodded with a smile. I see you running here every day. You really are a hardworking child. Is this mandated by the academy? Yi Zichen shook his head in response. The academy doesn't force anyone to do anything. I'm doing this because I want to. My teacher says that the greater someone's aptitude is, the harder they have to work. Only then will they be able to achieve more in the future. Oh, are you saying you have great aptitude? The elderly man asked with an intrigued expression. Yi Zichen blushed slightly, and he hurriedly shook his head in response. Not at all. No one in Shrek Academy dares to proclaim that they have good aptitude. Make sure to take it easy and look after yourself. Grandpa, I'm going now. After that, he continued on his morning run. The elderly man looked on at his departing figure with a smile, and murmured to himself, it's so good to be young. I didn't think that it would be so enjoyable to watch these young people every day. Right at this moment, a cold voice rang out beside him. How much longer do you intend to do this? A hint of surprise and elation appeared in his eyes, and he hurriedly turned to find the person that he was constantly thinking of day and night. Chapter 1728. Don't mind me, I'm just exercising, he said with a benevolent smile. A myriad of emotions welled up in Long Yeyu's heart as she appraised Chen Xinji, and the anger in his heart seemed to have vanished. Presented before her was a wizened old man in a rough cloth robe, and even though his silver hair was still impeccably combed, he was looking nothing like the almighty battle god hall master of the past. Who could have imagined that a quasi-god would be reduced to a sweeper in Shrek Academy? On that day, Chen Xinji had accompanied Tang Wuling back to Shrek Academy before paying Long Yeyu a visit, but she had refused to see him. Chen Xinji didn't force the issue and asked for one of the most ordinary rooms in the academy to stay in. The next day, he began to sweep the drill ground. Tang Wuling almost had a heart attack upon seeing this, and he tried to talk Chen Xinji out of his new job on many occasions, but Chen Xinji refused to budge, continuing to sweep the drill ground every day before returning to his room. It had been 3 months since he had first begun this lifestyle, and not once during this time had he gone to visit Long Yeyu again. He seemed to have become completely accustomed to this lifestyle, living off simple meals and sweeping the drill ground every day. This lifestyle was far simpler than his past life, and even he was growing a little complacent. Only the higher-ups of Shrek Academy were aware of his identity, but they could only allow him to do as he pleased. On some days, Yuan and Zenshin would invite Chen Xinji for some tea and a chat after the latter completed his sweeping duties. Both of them were limit Douluos of the older generation, so they naturally had a lot to talk about. Long Yeyu had refused to meet him during this time, but she was well aware of what he had been up to. Yali had gone to find her on countless occasions to put in a good word for Chen Xinji. It was downright ridiculous that a limit Douluo was sweeping the academy's yard every day. Prior to meeting Chen Xinji on this day, Long Yeyu stubbornly refused to acknowledge him, thinking that Chen Xinji was humiliating himself like this every day in order to force her to meet him. However, for some reason, the sight of his lonesome and elderly figure only struck her with a sense of sympathy and melancholy. No matter how much she resented him, she had never disregarded his accomplishments. It was certainly no easy feat to become a quasi-god while also assuming command over the Battle God Hall and the Sea God Legion. During the past century, Chen Xinji had put in countless blood, sweat, and tears to further his own career, yet he was now yard sweeper for the academy. He was sweeping the drill ground very carefully without any semblance of half-heartedness, and Long Yeyu could sense that he was very happy and content. Everything was very natural, and there was nothing forced about what he was doing. It was as if he had immersed himself into his sweeping. She had already watched from the shadows many times, and she finally couldn't resist the urge to show herself on this day. This was their first meeting since Chen Xinji arrived in Shrek Academy. Leave, Long Yeyu said. Chen Xinji shook his head in response. No, I'm not going anywhere, even if you beat me. I have no home to return to. Are you going to force out a lonely old man without a home? At the very least, I have food and shelter here. You have no home? What happened to your family? Long Yeyu snapped. Chen Xinji smiled and replied, I've already severed all ties with them so they won't be implicated for my crimes. I'm currently a traitor to the Federation, a lonesome old man with nowhere to go. Thankfully, Tang Wuling was kind enough to give me a place to stay, and only Shrek Academy can ensure my safety. How can you be so shameless? Long Yeyu was on the verge of storming away in a fit of rage. Chen Xinji chuckled. This is a new skill I picked up recently. I sorely regret not learning this skill earlier. Otherwise, I wouldn't be in such a piffle situation. Long Yeyu pointed at the front gate of the academy. Get out. Get out of here right now. I don't want to see your face. Chen Xinji replied with a serious expression. I'm not leaving. Yeyu. Shrek Academy doesn't belong to you. It belongs to everyone. I'm just going to continue sweeping here, and I won't disrupt your life. So don't worry. Shrek Academy looked after you in my stead for so many years. All I want is to be able to repay the academy. I don't know what else I can do, but sweeping is definitely within my capabilities. Regardless of how much longer I live for, I'm going to sweep here for the rest of my life. I already made all of the necessary preparations before coming here. The Chen Xinji of the past is already dead. All that's left is old man Chen the sweeper. So don't chase me away. I'll be a homeless beggar if you do. Long Yeyu's lips twitched slightly upon hearing this. Never did she think that Chen Xinji would become like this one day. However, his benevolent smile and genuine expression made her unable to work up the resolve to kick him out. Right at this moment, Yuzichin had just finished another lap, and while he was running, he already saw that an elderly woman had approached Chen Xinji. He was just a new student, and Long Yeyu rarely ever showed herself in public, so he had no idea who she was. Are you two fighting? Yuzichin asked in a curious manner. Chen Xinji smiled and replied, No, we're just discussing a technical problem. Yuzichin faltered slightly upon hearing this. Were there supposed to be any technical elements to sweeping? He had heard some of their earlier conversation, and he turned to Long Yeyu as he said, Don't be so hard on Grandpa. Have some compassion. Long Yeyu snapped. You don't know anything. Keep running. Chen Xinji chuckled. Why are you yelling at a child? I think he's a good boy. It looks like Shrek Academy has a bright future ahead. Long Yeyu turned back to him with an enraged expression. That has nothing to do with you. Get out of here right away. Just the sight of you pisses me off. Chen Xinji replied with a smile. That means I hold some place in your heart. Otherwise, you wouldn't feel anything toward me. That's even more reason for me to stay. Long Yeyu immediately blushed upon hearing this. What happened to your pride and dignity? Chen Xinji replied. I'm just a sweeper. What need do I have for pride? I've clung onto it my entire life, but I don't think it's worth that much now, so I discarded it. You. Long Yeyu suddenly discovered that there was nothing she could do to such a shameless Chen Xinji. Humph. In the end, she could only storm away. Chen Xinji leaned on his broom as he watched her depart with gentle eyes. Yuzichin was still standing beside him, and he was also watching Long Yeyu's departing figure. What are you looking at, Grandpa? Chen Xinji. I'm looking at that grandma over there. She was really beautiful when she was young. Even now, she still retained a lot of her charm. It's just not apparent to little kids like you. Yuzichin asked. You must have a lot of history with that grandma, right, Grandpa? Why is she so mad at you? Shouldn't you be trying to console her? A wry smile appeared on Chen Xinji's face upon hearing this. If I could console her with words, I wouldn't be sweeping here. It's all right. I'm confident that she'll forgive me someday. Yuzichin was quite surprised to hear this. Is it that serious? Chen Xinji sighed. I did some very stupid things in the past, but let's not talk about that. Continue on your run. Don't let me delay your training. I have to keep sweeping as well. All right. Thus, Yuzichin continued on his run with a bunch of questions in his heart, while Chen Xinji continued to sweep in a leisurely manner. Chapter 1729. He really was beginning to like his new identity as Old Man Chen the Sweeper. At the very least, he didn't have any burdens. He didn't have to think about anything, and nothing that was happening in the outside world had anything to do with him. The first thing that he did after coming here was stomp his own soul communicator into pieces. Regardless of what was happening outside, he was just a sweeper. Finally, Chen Xinji finished sweeping the drill ground at around noon, and at this point, the drill ground had become quite lively and bustling. After tipping everything he had swept up into the bin, Chen Xinji prepared to return to his room. All of a sudden, he stopped in his tracks, and a displeased look appeared on his face. I already told you not to come and find me here. Yuan and Zenshin chuckled. It's all right. All of the kids are in their classrooms, so no one can see. By the way, did Elder Long just come to see you? An exasperated look appeared on Chen Xinji's face. How is a limit Douluo like you so into gossip? Yuan and Zenshin chuckled. You're one to talk. You're also a limit Douluo, yet you've become a yard sweeper, haven't you? So, how did it go? Chen Xinji rolled his eyes and replied, Let's go talk at my place. He sped up as he spoke and made his way toward one of the nearby buildings. Chen Xinji's room wasn't very large. Tang Wuling had wanted to organize better lodging for him, but he stubbornly refused. However, his room received very good sun exposure, especially in the mornings, where most of the room was bathed in sunlight. After entering the room, Chen Xinji boiled some water and made 2 cups of tea. Yuan and Zenshin immediately made himself comfortable, taking a cup of tea before sitting down on the wooden sofa. Your room is a really good place to sunbathe. Chen Xinji offered no response and began to drink his tea. So what happened? Yuan and Zenshin asked in an eager manner. Chen Xinji snapped. What do you think happened? If she could forgive me just like that, do you think I would be sweeping the yard here? I'll just have to take things slow. I know her very well. There's a soft heart beneath that hard exterior of hers, so I'll get through to her eventually. Yuan and Zenshin raised an eyebrow upon hearing this. I think that's going to be very difficult. What would you know? Chen Xinji grumbled. Yuan and Zenshin replied. She harbors too much resentment toward you. I don't think you have much of a chance no matter how soft her heart is. At her age, it's very difficult for you to do anything that could move her so deeply that she would forgive you. You ruined her youth. How is she supposed to forgive you? If you're here just to rub salt into my wounds, then get out. Don't waste my tea. Chen Xinji snapped. Yuan and Zenshin chuckled. Hey, don't get mad. I'm here to offer you some ideas. How about this? Disable your own martial soul so you become a normal old man. That'll surely be enough to move her. Chen Xinji almost dropped his cup of tea upon hearing this. Piss off. What kind of terrible idea is that? Do you not know how old I am? Without my martial soul to support me, I'll drop dead on the spot. I won't even be able to wait until she decides to forgive me. That's a valid concern. I guess there's a slight issue with that plan. It's not a slight issue, it's a huge issue. If you don't have any useful ideas, then keep your mouth shut, Chen Zhenji said before taking a sip of his tea. Yuan and Zenshin gave a resigned shrug and also began to drink his tea in silence. After a while, Chen Zhenji suddenly said, how about this? I pretend to disable my martial soul, and that convinces her to forgive me, so she stops me right at the last moment. Yuan and Zenshin's lips twitched slightly upon hearing this. I think you've read too many corny novels. What if she just looks at you and tells you to go ahead? Will you actually do it? If you don't, then you'll have lied to her, and she'll be even less willing to forgive you. Chen Zhenji's face immediately fell upon hearing this. You're right, there doesn't seem to be anything I can do. So be it, I'll just continue living like this. At the very least, I was able to meet her today, and that means she's always been keeping tabs on me. As long as I continue to persist, my efforts will bear fruit someday. Yuan and Zenshin smiled, and said, that's the spirit. This isn't a bad situation, just take it slow and enjoy life. Chen Zhenji nodded in response. Now that I've been freed from all my duties and responsibilities, I'm seeing the world in an entirely new way. Yuan and Zenshin replied, it's about time you took a rest. He never discussed the state of the continent or the battle god hall with Chen Zhenji. As a quasi-god himself, he was well aware of how painful it had to have been for Chen Zhenji to give up so much. As such, there was no need to mention subjects that would only sour the mood. Upon returning to her room, the serious look on Long Yeyu's face immediately faded. In all honesty, she wasn't entirely unmoved by Chen Zhenji's decision to give up everything and assist Shrek Academy and the Tang sect in obtaining eternal heaven. The loftier one's status, the more they value their positions, so the fact that Chen Zhenji had given up so much for her was already sufficient proof of his repentance. However, just as Yuan and Zenshin had said, she had harbored resentment toward him for so many years, and she simply couldn't bring herself to forgive him right away. Despite this, she was suffering greatly from watching him sweep the yard every day. Her man was supposed to be a mighty figure who could carry the weight of the world on his shoulders. How could he be reduced to a sweeper? Unbeknownst to Chen Zhenji, his newly adopted role had a very big impact on Long Yeyu. She couldn't chase him away as he refused to leave, but she couldn't just continue to watch him sweep the yard like this, either. With that in mind, she dialed Tang Wuling's number. He was the only one she could turn to. Elder Long. Tang Wuling's voice rang out from the other end. What's going on with you, Wulin? You're just going to let that old bastard sweep the yard every day? Don't you find that embarrassing? Get him to leave. He can do whatever he wants. Just stop making an embarrassment of himself. Tang Wulin was rather startled by Long Yeyu's heated words, and a wry smile appeared on his face as he replied, I'm sure you know what the boundless ocean Douluo's personality is like. Elder Long, I've tried to persuade him on many occasions, but he refuses to listen to me. Also, he did assist us immensely in securing eternal heaven, and as a junior, I can't force him to do anything. After venting her frustrations, Long Yeyu had also regained some mental clarity, and she gave a cold her rump before ending the call. Indeed, as the current leader of the Tang sect and Shrek Academy, Tang Wulin couldn't just enforce his will on a limit Douluo who had assisted both of the powers that he represented. Thus, Long Yeyu could only pace back and forth in her room in a rare display of discomposure. After the call was cut off, Tang Wulin could only remove his soul communicator in a resigned manner. He was about to begin forging now, and heavenly refinement required absolute quiet and concentration, so he would always cut off all contact with the outside world during his forging sessions. After returning from the battle god hall, he had gone into seclusion for an entire month before continuing in his forging. After that 1 month, Tang Wulin didn't appear to have undergone any noticeable changes, but only he was aware of just how important that month had been for himself. The attainment of spear essence had not only evolved his understanding of the spear to a high level, it had opened up a new world to him, and many of the things he had failed to understand in the past became clear to him. The guidance provided to Tang Wulin by Guan Yue was extremely important. It essentially paved the way for his progression to the limit Douluo level and allowed him to truly understand what was required to get there. During his seclusion, Tang Wulin discovered that in order to become a limit Douluo, he had to make himself more mellow and well-rounded. All those who had reached the limit Douluo level in the past were all individuals who had been able to fully understand and integrate their abilities. Chapter 1730. For a hyper Douluo to become a limit Douluo, one had to integrate all of their abilities together, accumulating quantity for a fundamental qualitative change. Tang Wulin had already begun this process by inventing his Dragon Emperor restriction techniques, but this was not an easy process. He was already working very hard, but he still encountered many difficulties. During 2 major breakthroughs, he had created Dragon Emperor Break and Dragon Emperor Slash, but since then, he had spent close to a year working extremely hard to improve himself, even using elemental tribulations as training tools to help him better integrate his abilities, all to no avail. However, Guan Yue's guidance had shown him the way, and in the short span of a single month, he had created 2 more Dragon Emperor restriction techniques and truly completed the overall framework of his Dragon Emperor restriction techniques. Judging from the current state of his cultivation, Tang Wulin estimated that he would be able to create 7 Dragon Emperor restriction techniques in total. The 5 techniques that he had invented thus far was already his current limit, and he had integrated his 9 arts of the Golden Dragon, as well as his 7 Golden Dragon King abilities and some Blue Silver Emperor Soul skills. Most importantly, the wills of the 3 opponents Tang San had faced had become the essence of his 3rd, 4th, and 5th Dragon Emperor restriction techniques. However, if he wanted to take his Dragon Emperor restriction techniques a step further and create the 6th technique, he would have to break the 16th Golden Dragon King seal and attain his 8th Golden Dragon King ability first. Alternatively, he would have to reach the limit Douluo level. Tang Wulin had already examined the final 4 Golden Dragon King seals on many occasions in his cultivation, and the more he did so, the more he was able to sense just how fearsome they were. Having witnessed Arahang's invincible Vajra body, Tang Wulin estimated that he would have to elevate his physical constitution to the invincible Vajra body level before he could withstand the power of the 15th Golden Dragon King seal. Of course, he still wasn't at that level yet, but he should be able to close to that level once the incredible regenerative properties of the Golden Dragon King bloodline were taken into account. This meant that if he could progress in his cultivation or even reach the limit Douluo level, then there was a very good chance that he would be able to handle the 15th seal. However, that would be the extent of his tolerance. Whenever he attempted to examine the final 3 Golden Dragon King seals with his spiritual power, he would always be struck by a sense of uncontrollable fear, as if something extremely terrifying were lurking within those 3 seals, and it definitely wasn't something that he could withstand. Having already come into contact with his father on several occasions, he was aware of what true godly power was like, and he was almost certain that the power within those final 3 Golden Dragon King seals were all of the godly level. This meant that unless he could become a god, there was no way he would be able to access the power in those 3 seals and survive. However, it was currently virtually impossible to become a god on the Douluo star. Furthermore, becoming a god was only the prerequisite for breaking the 16th seal. There were still 2 more seals to come after that. What level would he have to reach before he could withstand the power in those 2 seals? Through his understanding of the Dragon Emperor restriction techniques, Tang Wulin was currently able to fortify the Golden Dragon King seals on his own to a certain extent. He knew that he absolutely couldn't break the 15th seal unless it was absolutely necessary. Otherwise, without the 15th seal acting as a buffer, the final 3 seals would claim his life as soon as they were broken. Thus, Tang Wulin had decided that he wasn't going to try and further his Dragon Emperor restriction techniques for now. Instead, he was focusing more on his forging, further baptizing his own body through withstanding elemental tribulations. After experiencing so many elemental tribulations, Tang Wulin's understanding of this natural phenomenon had deepened over time. Elemental tribulations were imbued with extremely pure energy, and even though it had no conscious will, it would naturally take shape under certain special circumstances. With his superb regenerative abilities, Tang Wulin was able to frequently transcend elemental tribulations during his forging of metals, forging his own body as well in the process. Thus, even though there was no way for him to attain the body sex invincible Vajra body, he could sense that there was a very good chance for him to elevate his physical constitution to the same level through alternative means. The fact that he was able to perform heavenly refinement without any restraint was his greatest strength as a divine blacksmith. In terms of technique, he was still inferior to divine blacksmith Senhua, but due to his far superior ability to tolerate elemental tribulations, he had a far greater margin for error, thereby resulting in a significantly higher heavenly refinement success rate. During the past few months, he had constantly been experimenting with a new method of forging, which was to use the rainbow lotus flame he had received from Huo Tian. This flame was very special in that it could incinerate virtually all things, and what came as a massively pleasant surprise to Tang Wulin was that it possessed a purification ability, meaning that it was able to purge the impurities within all things. Of course, the prerequisite for this was sufficient control. Otherwise, it would purge everything instead of just the impurities. This This control had been very hard to come by, and Tang Wuling had wasted countless units of materials before he finally attained an elementary level of mastery over this flame. He only had one objective for learning to control this flame. He wanted to use it to refine his own suit of 4-word battle armor. All of his friends' suits of 4-word battle armor were gradually taking shape, but he still didn't even have a single piece of 4-word battle armor yet, and it would be a lie to say that this didn't bother him. However, his suit of 3-word battle armor was at such a high caliber that he would have to perform heavenly refinement on 7 metal alloys in order to upgrade it into a suit of 4-word battle armor. During this process, he would have to face a 7-color elemental tribulation, and it was far too difficult to ensure harmony between all 7 types of metals. There were simply too many permutations to calculate. With so many unpredictable elements at play, there was next to no chance that he could successfully complete 7 metal heavenly refinement. Currently, 4 metal heavenly refinement was his limit, but the thought of settling for a suit of 4-word battle armor constructed from 4 metal alloys filled him with indignation. What are you thinking about? Let's begin. A gentle voice dragged Tang Wuling back to reality, and even though he had already heard this voice many times, he still couldn't help but shudder upon hearing it. This was because the owner of the voice was Ling Zichen. The current Ling Zichen was a far cry from the Ling Zichen of the past. She was wearing a long pink dress that accentuated her exaggerated curves to perfection, and there was a seductive look in her eyes. Tang Wuling couldn't imagine how the people of the Tang sect would react if they were to see the current Ling Zichen. Perhaps they wouldn't even be able to imagine that there was such a facet to Ling Zichen's persona, but the fact of the matter was that this very persona was currently being displayed to Tang Wuling. Thanks so much for watching this video. Don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe. Also leave a comment down below with suggestions on what novels to read.